How important is recovery after a workout?
It can depend on the type of workout, or at least the type of workout can determine your recovery length. When you look at something like a cardiovascular workout, the recovery time frame is a lot shorter because what you're looking to recover or bring back to balance is just your resting heart rate, the amount of oxygen and blood you're delivering to all the tissues, kind of coming back to homeostasis. That's a relatively quick process that's going to happen in a few hours after cardiovascular training. When it comes into resistance training is where you get the difference. If you're getting a high enough intensity to create actual microscopic damage to the muscle tissues themselves, you're looking at somewhere around that 48-hour mark of recovery, which is where people kind of get into that every other day type of lift. There's a third factor that's probably the least understood, I would say, between the masses, which is the stress on your nervous system. So if you do very, very high intensity exercise, think someone who is trained and does very heavy load squats or deadlifts, not only do you fatigue your muscles, but you actually fatigue your nervous system and its ability to activate and utilize all those muscles. And that can be an even longer recovery time. In fact, when you get into something like delayed onset muscle soreness, I would say the current evidence for that is that that is most likely actually a nervous system protective response that's saying, all right, bring it down, we need time to recover. And there are even ways to kind of measure some of that stuff if you get into the real nitty gritty of it.
What are some methods you can use to shorten the recovery time from workout?
So you can, I say there's no way to cheat tissue healing. So tissue healing for microscopic damage is going to take a certain amount of time, and that can't be influenced a whole lot. But the amount of soreness and some of these other factors can be manipulated. Active recovery is far and away the best way to deal with muscle soreness. So I tell people all the time, if you have a heavy leg day, that next day, go for a walk, go for an easy bike, something just to get those muscles pumped out, turn over the blood that's in there essentially, so get new oxygen, nutrients to the muscles, carry out the waste product, and kind of reset that process. But there's a whole lot of adjunct things you can do to help. I mean, ice baths are popular now, elevation, compression. Most of this stuff is operating on a improve the feelings of soreness, which is going to allow you to exercise again, but it's not necessarily going to make like the muscle tissue itself heal faster.
How important is what you eat after a workout, like recovery? Like, what do you suggest eating after a workout?
Eating, hugely important after a workout. There's actually kind of conflicting evidence about how close to the workout you need to eat. There was a while that we thought you had to get protein within that first 30-minute window. It may or may not be true because now there's been a research study to kind of contradict and say, well, as long as it's in the next few hours, it's not a massive difference. Um, but eating is huge. So there is, well, a step back is your muscles primarily use glycogen as a fuel source. So those are essentially sugars that are stored in your muscles. And as you exercise, you use those sugars up, and depleting those is part of what creates fatigue. The faster you replenish those glycogen stores, so actually getting some carbs either during workout if it's really intense or long, or immediately post workout replenishes those glycogen stores faster and you recover faster. Most of the research out there says a combination of carbohydrates and protein sometime within the first few hours after a workout gives people the best recovery.
When it comes to like more like sports massage, things like that, like acupuncture, cupping, what methods do you suggest and why?
The biggest suggestion is to individualize it because everyone responds differently. I mean, I could sit here and bring up clients I've worked with that they do acupuncture, dry needling, and that's their best benefit. Some people do cupping, and that's their best benefit. Some people do massage, and that's their best benefit. So It's a very individual response. So I usually suggest that people try each of the options and stick with what works best for them.
Do you suggest like someone going to like meeting with like a professional and determining like what methods of recovery they should use?
Yeah, I think no matter what you're doing, meeting with a professional who focuses on that topic is a good idea. Just like if you're going to manage your finances, it's probably smart to meet with a financial advisor. If you're trying to manage your nutrition, it's smart to meet with someone who specializes in nutrition. You want to optimize your workout recovery, meet with someone who specializes in workout recovery. And that's not to say we can't do some of that stuff on our own. It depends on our background, but I think having that guidance is extremely beneficial, and you can always kind of learn on top of that to add even more knowledge to kind of build your recovery plan around.
How much do you think you should hydrate after a high intensity workout? How important is your hydration after?
Hydration is going to be a massively important thing. At the end of the day, most processes in your body require water to happen. As far as exactly how much, there's a lot of different guidelines out there, and I wouldn't say I've got them specifically memorized off the top of my head, but they're usually talking, I believe, somewhere in like a 30 to 40 ounces of liquid a day for hydration is kind of your standard. And then workouts would have some type of additional hydration with it. If those workouts are in the heat or if they're longer, you would have additional hydration and some balance of both water and whatever sports drink you prefer. Uh, and that kind of comes back to the importance of carbohydrates and electrolytes because our body needs those things to function too.
What role does sleep play in recovery?
I think sleep is probably the most underutilized things and for most athletes. Um, it has so many benefits, both from physical performance benefits to cognitive performance benefits. I know in professional sports, it's getting really big to track sleep because they're seeing better recovery, better performance. I mean, I know just off the top of my head of research studies I've looked at, um, basketball players. This one study I remember is they directed half of the team to get, I think, an additional 2 hours of sleep, but their free throw percentage went up by like 15 or 20%. You see the same thing with tennis serve accuracy. So it kind of works across sports that performance is better with enough sleep, and we usually lose performance with when we have too little sleep.
How much sleep do you recommend getting?
I think most of the current recommendations are in the 7 to 9 hour range, but there is starting to be some evidence out there that the more physical your job or lifestyle is, that number should be even higher.
What are the big differences between cold water and hot water and like heat recovery, cold recovery and heat recovery?
To me, there's some individual preference like anything else, but in general, heat is more of a adjunct to either like loosen up a muscle or prep for performance, as long as it's not like being used to treat like a new injury or something like that. So if your lower back's tight or your shoulder's tight, heat prior to a performance tends to do well, whereas ice tends to be more beneficial to the recovery side of things. It seems to decrease, depending on the studies you read, decrease some of the discomfort, decrease some of the soreness. There's even some potential mood boosting effects that people have seen, quicker turnarounds for higher intensity workouts. But I think a simple rule of thumb is heat as kind of a warm up type of thing, cold as kind of a recovery type of thing.
When let's say I just hit a high intensity chest workout, how much time should I give myself before I hit it again, before I hit chest again?
I'd say at least 48 hours, but some of that's individual. I'm a big proponent of tracking numbers when you can. So I did a little experiment with myself at one point, and I was um, looking at squatting twice a week, and I would also have a day of deadlifts. And I found that my performance didn't really improve when I had one squat day and one deadlift day. And I essentially attributed that to the fact that the squat days were intense enough that I hadn't fully rebounded by the time I'd step under the squat bar again. So I lost a little bit from a weight number, just started to feel a little bit more fatigued. Legs were just kind of heavier and just didn't feel recovered.
Do you think it's fine, like if one day you hit chest and you hit legs, you just alternate between the two until you reach like the 48-hour mark?
Yes, it the biggest thing I would say about alternating chest as legs is obviously you would want some amount of back and some amount of shoulder in there as well. My personal philosophy is to build most plans around targeting legs, and if you're going to separate legs into categories, you can do posterior chain, hamstrings, and glutes versus anterior chain of quads. So it can be either one day all legs or 2 days posterior chain, anterior chain, and then separating the body into chest or pressing motions and pulling motions. Um, and then it just depends how specific you want to get, if you want to get into specific arm workouts and things like that.
Post workout, how valuable do you think like stretching is, and how long should you stretch after a workout?
The evidence on stretching and improved performance or improved injuries is not very strong. In fact, there was an article I read the other day, and I'm not going to remember the exact categories. This was a little bit more of a longer term thing, but they looked at stretching, resistance training, dynamic warm ups, or they might have even been calling it proprioception. There was a fourth category that I'm not remembering. But they looked at in those four groups, when did you see injury reduction? And you saw injury reduction in all of the groups except for stretching. And it's an article I have tucked away, so if you want it, let me know. But it is stretching is not shown to have much of a injury prevention component. But the one little piece I would add to that is people's terminology on stretching is a lot of times different person to person. I will have someone talk about doing band exercises and referring to that as stretching, which for me is that my terminology wise, I wouldn't call that a stretch. I would call that more of a dynamic warm up. So it's always good to make sure you're making sure there's an agreement on language.
Well, with that being said, like how much time should you build in for stretching, and like if you're a workout routine, like in a workout plan? None at all, little.
I would say as little as possible because it'll leave more time for the stuff that there's a bunch of evidence for. So if doing some ankle mobilization work or some hamstring stretching helps you feel ready to squat, I think then absolutely do it. But you want to make that warm up as efficient as possible because your real benefit's going to come from the squatting itself, coming from dynamic control, coming from you can lengthen the hamstrings with a good morning type of resistance movement, which is going to lengthen the hamstrings so it kind of works as a stretch, but it's going to do it under load, forcing a dynamic nature and control, which is going to give you a little bit more benefit than if you were just laying on your back with like a strap around your foot, pulling to stretch your hamstring that way.
You talked about like the terminology of like stretching. Would you consider like foam rolling stretching?
No, I would consider foam rolling more along the lines of like massage type of thing.
So do you think foam rolling is more valuable for post-workout recovery than stretching?
I can't say I know like one exactly versus the other. I would say of all the things I know, foam rolling is probably better just because we have evidence that stretching doesn't seem to decrease injury or decrease soreness. We have some evidence that massage is beneficial for soreness, and if foam rolling is more similar to massage, I would think it would play out that foam rolling is more beneficial, but I also can't say I've seen an exact study measuring that.